I am the youngest of 4 brothers, all a year apart. At this time I was about 9, and our family friend was spending the night at our place. We lived in a 2-story house with a basement. At this time our mother was single and dating a lot, so during this particular night she was away. We saw how to make a Ouija board on this episode of a show called Mystery Hunters, a Canadian kids channel, YTV. So we decided it would be a fun thing to try while we had the house to ourselves. So we cut up an old cardboard box and made a Ouija board from it. We put felt on the bottom of the triangle thing so that it would slide better, and it worked pretty well. We all tried putting our fingers on the triangle and asking questions, but got no response. Then me and my brother asked a question to the likes of, "Is there a demon here?" And the triangle started to move. We looked at each other and the expression on our faces showed that it was neither of us moving the triangle. We immediately got scared and ran into the kitchen. When we got there, we heard a crash come from the living room. It sounded like our TV fell off the wall unit. But when we ran back, we saw that nothing was wrong. After this, we decided to grab a Bible and read. The first words we read in unison were, "God's people are doomed." Frightened by this, we turned on the TV and saw it was Dave Chappelle, so we assumed it was going to be something funny. But when the audio began, the first words from Dave were, "And all the people died," to which the audience started laughing, and then it went to a commercial. Freaked out by both of these strange and unlikely things happening, the waterworks began, and we got up and ran upstairs crying and screaming to my brother's bedroom. When we got up the stairs and into his bedroom, we heard footsteps that sounded exactly like ours run up the stairs after us. Immediately I assumed it was one of my brothers or our friends late up the stairs. But then we realized we were all in the room and no one passed by the door. We began to panic, so we held each other, freaking out. It's hard to say if we heard anything after this point, so this was the last that happened for now. 2 hours later, me and my brother, the bravest of the 4, decided that this might be all in our heads, and that we would go play video games on my mum's computer in her office, Diablo 2 to be exact. The door to her office had no handle, so my brother pushed the door open, and immediately after he pushed the door, it slammed back on his arm, and all the way from the base we heard clear and loud laughter. The only way I can describe it is it was the sound of a witch that echoed through the entire house. At this point we ran down the stairs, out the door into my grandmother's house, which was down the street, and waited for Mum to come home. I'm not sure if she completely believed us, but this was when we were kids. I'm 23 years old now, and this story sticks out as the only and craziest paranormal experience I have ever had. There was a small door that led to the attic space in my bedroom, and it became a habit that I would shut the door as I walked into my bedroom a few times a week. I didn't think anything of it, and just assumed my mum didn't close it all the way when she left it. After a while I made the mistake of joking with her when she made a comment about me not picking up after myself, and I said something like, "Every night I have to close the attic door behind you, how about you shut it all the way when you're done?" She then informed me that she hadn't been in the attic for months. I asked my brother and my father. None of them had. So then I started to pay real close attention to it, making sure it was closed in the morning, checking it after school, and checking after dinner, then heading up to bed. And what do you know? It was open. After a few months of wondering, studying, experimenting, I thought I'd see what happened if I just didn't shut the door. I opened the door before school and checked it after school. Still open. Closed it after dinner. Still open. Before bed. Still open. Now, I'm laying in bed, mind going crazy with the open door across the room. I decide to check it out, so I roll over and focus on the black space into the attic. That is when I see a face staring back at me. I bolt downstairs, wake my parents up, get ridiculed by my brother, and switch bedrooms with my brother and move into a new house about 6 months later due to an expanding household. And what do you know? My new physics teacher and his wife actually bought our house. I could have forgotten all about the events and chalked it up to me having an overactive imagination. But then, I discovered in my senior year how awesome our physics teacher was, and it became my favorite class by far and favorite teacher. At the end of senior year, my friend and I took our VHS camcorder around, doing mostly silly things, but then took it to my old house to see what they'd done with the place. We got a very fun tour. I got to tell stories about all the projects my dad did that were still a part of the house. Then the wife led us upstairs and showed us the sewing room. So I jokingly ask, "Notice anything strange about this room?" And her face goes blank. On camera she asks what I mean, and I try to shrug it off but end up saying something about the attic door. She confirmed that every time she comes up to sew, it's open, and then tells us that the second day of being in the house, their dog, a German Shepherd, had gone into that room, but would not go back downstairs. He started barking and could not be consoled, then jumped through the window, landing on the tin roof over the porch and running off. The dog did not come back until the next day, and has not stepped foot into the hallway that leads upstairs since. I had the initial thought that I could show my parents and brother the story I had on film, but I decided to just let it be. The attic is the space in the house that runs parallel to the second floor, not above it. I was 11 to 12 when this was going on, so I did not immediately suss it all out. When I told my family that I saw a face, it was just my brother that ridiculed me. My father definitely would have checked for an actual human because of one of the first comments he made was about a family that recently had a coin collection stolen from their house across the street. The event itself was easy to shrug off because I could have chalked it up to a lot of other possibilities. It wasn't until 5 years later that it became freaky. The look on the wife's face before she told us about the dog was very telling, like something they decided to never put much thought into. Now my story adds depth to their experience, and theirs to mine. This did not make me a believer in the paranormal. I told the story as a collection of details, not a confirmation of ghosts. But what it did do was never make me a non-believer. That face, it was expressionless, dimly lit, through a door smaller than a 2x4, with a knob that had to be turned in order to open it. I wish I still had the VHS. This was from over 25 years ago now, and I moved a lot after high school, and the tape sadly never made it through all those moves.
First, let me say I come from a somewhat unconventional family. We are all a little weird or wacky in our own way. Sometimes we get along great, and sometimes not so much. On Christmas Day, my parents and I usually stay home and don't see any of our extended family. However, this past year, we decided to go to my grandmother's house. This is a little different because my grandmother and I have a very rocky relationship with one another. I have overheard my dad mentioning stories about my grandmother and my now deceased grandfather that bordered on child abuse. I remember being really young, and my grandparents screaming at me for the smallest things, and my parents abruptly taking me home. But anyway, I'm in my 20s now, and my father decided since it was Christmas, we could give spending the holiday at my grandma's a chance. The day started out pretty uneventful and, dare I say, pleasant. A lot of conversations and happy memories. My dad and aunt were reminiscing about snowball fights and such from their childhood. There was a healthy conversation about politics, which I thought for sure would change the mood, but surprisingly did not. After several hours and a nice dinner, everyone made their way to the living room for coffee and to just hang out on the couches. I left my coffee on the kitchen table and made my way to the back of the house where the only bathroom was. I washed my hands, fixed my shirt, and walked out of the bathroom. When I walked into the hallway, I was greeted by my grandma, who was just standing there, staring at me. I said, "Hi, what's going on?" And I tried to keep walking, but she wouldn't move. Now this is a narrow hallway, and you're only fitting one across. "Excuse me, please." I said, semi-annoyed, yet still she did not budge at all. Finally, she spoke up and said, "What do you think you're doing?" She sounded nervous and almost a little angry. "I was just going to the bathroom," I said, starting to get uneasy about the entire situation. She started to poke my chest and said, "Where is he?" At this point, I was beyond confused. I told her I had no clue what she was talking about. Where's who? I finally shoved past her and started to make my way down the long hallway. That's when it happened. I heard her scream like a banshee and chase me down the hall. I turned around and she lunged at me with a small kitchen knife. She was trying to stab me. She just kept screaming, "Where is he? Where is he?" At this point, she had fallen to the ground trying to take me down with her. After a minute of this, my father finally came running in with my aunt and lifted her up. I was too scared to use any force because I didn't want to hurt her, but I also didn't want to get stabbed. I was so angry and upset I started to grab my things and told my family I was leaving. As I made my way toward the door, she walked back into the living room and said in a calm voice, "Oh, where are you going? You haven't even finished your coffee." I just left and didn't even respond. This woman, my grandmother, tried to stab me, and I still have no idea why. I found out several weeks later from my cousin that after my father and I left, my grandmother cried for hours and was basically inconsolable. She didn't know why we were so angry and left so abruptly. Clearly, my grandma had some sort of episode that night that she can't remember. But there are so many unanswered questions like, who was she referring to? I haven't seen or spoken to her since. My dad did try to reach out and explain to her why we left and why we won't be coming back, but she doesn't believe he is telling her the truth when he transcribes the events back to her. The worst part about all of this is that this will probably be the Christmas that I always remember the most.